Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractic connection out in New Mexico with Alan Miner. Alan, can you get us started by just introducing yourself and also reflecting on where you were at in life when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor? What was it that pushed you or maybe pulled you into this profession, and maybe a little bit about your background as well?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Nice to be on your podcast. I'm honored. Yeah, I've been a chiropractor now for almost 20 years. I went to Parker. My background was I had another career in finance and was having some really severe migraines. It was in a very unpurposeful job. I didn't even know that word purpose, but I knew I hated my life. And so I was missing so much work because of these migraines, and I was getting more and more prescriptions that weren't working. And a coworker suggested a chiropractor, so I went and got adjusted. And I haven't had a migraine since. The occasional headache, but no more. I'd get those auras, and I'd be in a dark room for 2 or 3 days, and just had a wicked. I used to skate as a kid, and I think I had some really bad falls, and my atlas was probably sitting out the side of my head. And when when that finally got set, I was reconnected. And so then, as I really disliked my job and was learning about this idea of a purpose in life, it was very obvious that chiropractic was was the path I wanted to go on. So went back and did prerequisites and ended up at Parker in Dallas, and came out of Parker in 2003 and opened my first practice right out of the gate in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it's been a very I've had a lot of favor since I made that decision to be a chiropractor. It's just amazing how things have lined up. You know, when you are on purpose and in alignment, it's just been interesting. Even so, looking back, even the challenging, difficult times, um, compared to having a career and a life that sucks, that's very uninspiring, that feels trapped. Even my hardest moments as a chiropractor have really been awesome because they are on purpose. They're led with a passion, and I've had a really fun career in the last 20 years, I think, and that kind of sets the foundation for it.
Mm. Can you reflect on the experience at Parker? What were some of the things that really helped you? What were some of the biggest challenges maybe you encountered? What groups did you gravitate towards and start really studying with
Yeah.
while you were there?
Yeah, Dr. Fabrizio Mancini was president when I was at Parker, who's still a great friend and mentor. And I took the approach. Parker was great at that time because of Parker's seminars. We used to have, people come on campus regularly who spoke at the seminars. So I got to pick up, Reggie Gold from the airport and Dr. Jim Sigafuz and um, uh, uh, just all kinds of really interesting, Dr. DiMartini. I took the approach of being exposed to everything. I went to every club there was. I was because chiropractic was a second career that wasn't really easy to get into. I felt so thankful to be in that environment. So I had friends who right away would gravitate towards one technique or one group, and I did everything. I mean, I literally, if there was a club and I had time, I was checking it out. I went to as many Parker seminars of people that would come through Dallas. I just became kind of that chiropractic nerd. I had a buddy, Josh Christensen, in my class, and we used to call it brain candy. Also, Dr. Patrick McMahon, he runs a chiropractic adjusting group now called Syntropy. We were in the same class, and we would just geek out on the philosophy, on the neuro side of stuff. It really was brain candy. Um, and there's just, there's not professions. I think because we struggled for so long, we have also always had that bent towards self-development, self-improvement. That's very much been a thread in chiropractic over the years, probably for our survival. And so, the books I was reading back then, Power versus Force, and I don't know, the very a very vitalistic chiropractic centered kind of existence, and that very much influenced then my practices and the work that I've done since. So.
Hmm. I appreciate you mentioning Power versus Force. That was a great book. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so can you talk about just like how life has played out? You said that chiropractic was hard to maybe find or get into. How was your second career? I'm curious, like if you could reflect on how your first career maybe helped you or supported you, maybe when you got out of school or when you were going through school. What was it about that experience in finance that helped you as you were becoming a chiropractor?
Yeah, it was there were a few things in there, but the bottom line is I did what you're supposed to do. I got a 4-year degree, I got a job. I was working in this finance logistics company doing finance. So, we'd move transportation around the country. We were responsible for the logistics of like large truckloads of freight. And it was just very boring work. I think I was making like $21,000 a year on 80 hours a week, sitting at a desk with two phones in my ears all day. And I just innately, I didn't know that word, but I innately knew this is not fun. Is this really what life is? You know, I was, I felt very trapped. The house, a car payment. And I was fortunate in that I was able to figure out how to get out of that, to get back to do prerequisites and kind of, I think, I started seeing over the years how many patients, there's that concept of like when people are present, there's a certain muscle tone. I always liken it to like a cat. You can just that there's tone to it, but you can like press a cat's muscle into the bone and it just lays there. Whereas when people really are just stuck in their past, they're almost mushy. There's just that like depression, regret, I should have, could have kind of tone to their body. And when people are really stressed out and worried and stuck in the future, there's that tension that's in their body. Um, and so I think I recognized all of that, learning what I know now in myself in that phase of my life. So it wasn't. I had to unwind a mortgage payment. I had to figure out how to pay for school, give up a lot of comforts that even at a $21,000 a year job, you know, there's still an income there. So that's where I say there are some struggles. And when I got back into school, I mean, I avoided all the math stuff, science stuff. I was in business. So all of a sudden I'm in this chemistry class going, I've never had this stuff. How am I going to get through this? And ended up finding tutors. And when your purpose is big enough, you figure it out. But those were the kinds of challenges, and just living in dingy places, just make ends meet through the
Mhm.
years. But again, when you've figured out a purpose, it really changes things. What steered me towards that was my chiropractor. I had a job offer from a competitor, um, and it was a lot more money, but a smaller company. And it was a role I was going to be managing like a fleet of truck drivers. I was probably 23, 24 at the time. I couldn't really see myself doing that. So I was complaining, I was getting adjusted, and I was telling, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm kind of stuck in this decision. This job pays a lot more money, it's more responsibility. The company I'm at's more stable. And he asked me the great question of, well, which one's going to get you where you want to be in 5 years? Like without a second hesitation, I said, neither. I mean, I knew neither was that. He said, you should be a chiropractor. At that point, the rest of the story, Ben, is I would miss a lot of work because of those migraines. And one day I was watching an Oprah Winfrey show, and she was the one who used to talk about purpose a lot. And I remember this show with all these people talking about how they like gave up their careers, changed their careers to live their life of purpose. Particularly, I remember this one black lady who had a passion for purses and had managed to make herself a millionaire off of her purse design. And anyways, at the end of that show, I had the first epiphany of that's why I don't enjoy my life, is it's not purposeful. And so I had this idea now for the next year of what is my purpose. And so bring that forward to this chiropractor suggesting you need to be a chiropractor. At that point, I knew I wanted to work for myself and I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And the other background to this story, besides my experience with chiropractic, is I have an uncle who is a chiropractor, was a chiropractor in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was not around him much growing up, but when I was, he was one adult he vibrated differently. He had great stories. He loved what he did. He wasn't like the other adults in my life. So I think there were probably some seeds planted along the way there. So.
Hmm. You mentioned Sigafuz and Reggie Gold. They're obviously
Yeah,
not alive anymore. Can you maybe just part of what this project is about is really trying to get people that are deep into the profession to share insights with a prospective student so that they can become aware of who these people were, and their resources are still out there, I believe, on YouTube. You can
yeah.
still listen to Reggie or Jim Sigafuz, but I'm just curious what they represented to you, maybe some lessons that you took away from them, how they helped you and supported you.
Absolutely. Let me bring that full circle with where I'm at now, where I'm the CEO of Chiro Matchmakers today. So, we've placed now more people around the world in associates and CAs than any other company. So, I have the unique position, Ben, of getting to work with students coming out looking for their first jobs and work with owners looking to place these students. And I will tell you the single biggest characteristic that owners are attracted to is certainty. And that's probably the hardest thing to find as a student. And so what Reggie Gold and Jim Sigafus did for me was they brought a lot of certainty. I think I bought in early on to chiropractic and this idea that our focus is the central nervous system. Let's make sure that it's operating at 100% so your body can adapt and repair to the environment you're in. As probably from my experience with I told you about skating and this atlas subluxation that was causing such horrible migraines and having that change, feeling that. So I went to school with that perspective. That uncle of mine actually had taken me to several Parker seminars before going to school, so I heard a lot of neat speakers along the way. So this wasn't a new concept, but about my first year in, I was really deep in like all the diagnostic courses um, and I think getting frustrated on some level. Um, I think because intuitively I was like, I don't love the idea of being this master diagnostician. That's not what I'm really passionate about. And we're studying all these diseases, and that's about the time that I think I first heard Jim Sigafus and Reggie Gold come along. And I'll tell you a great tip is in our huddles, we frequently will throw on 5 minutes of their stuff on YouTube. And it's just, there's so much truth in that. But what those guys both had was this absolute certainty in the principle. And the big difference from today and from boards and from schools is, it really does. Here's my joke to our doctors that come work with us who are very vitalistic minded. They'll get a little frustrated at our website sometimes, Ben, because they're like, wait, I want to see people from a vitalistic wellness perspective. The challenge is when you look at Google, there are not really people typing in maximum expression of innate intelligence as a Google search word. So they're typing in whatever condition they're looking at. And if you're really going to rank and grow a practice, you want to grab their attention on Google. So you've got to rectify that. The thing I've learned over the years is if you don't meet somebody where they're at, you don't have the opportunity to then teach them what we know. And so our systems in our offices are very much met it. All right, you're coming to me for whatever this condition is. Let's assess the nervous system, see how that correlates. But now, as we're going through a care plan, we have a runway to educate this person about what vitalistic chiropractic is. And I had a season where I was really working hard on only attracting people who had a wellness mindset. And the truth is, there's just when you try to look up Google words and they can show you what people are searching, people generally aren't searching optimal expression of innate intelligence. So to bring that back to Reggie and to Jim Sigafus, what they were absolutely clear and certain on is they were not treating a condition. And I mean, when you go back to what Reggie's teaching, it's all about that nerve interference and removing it. And you don't know what's going to happen with the body, and there was so much certainty in that. And for me at a time when I'm like trying to learn the Merck manual for boards, to then have these people come along and say, listen, stop, where you got to know that for your boards. That's what people are interested in this world. But where your certainty lies, where your contribution to a person is to become an expert in detecting where's their spine not functioning right, how's that impacting the neurology of the body, and correcting that, delivering a force. And even at that point, you don't know where that's going to go and what the body's going to do with that. But, Reggie Gold has his classic, what was that talk called? It's like an N that kind of leads you from innate intelligence through subluxation, through symptoms back to, and man, that's powerful. And so I think as I heard them speak more, and Jim Sigafuz had a great story of losing a child to medicine, that he didn't have the certainty to apply what he knew in chiropractic, and that really is what put a fire under him for his career to serve and save more lives. So that is what those guys, what you'll learn when you study them, is this understanding that more than ever, where we're unique, what differentiates us is the concept of innate intelligence and how the neurology plays into that. And that is one thing that no other profession touches on right now. And the world is so starved for that conversation. And if you can become an expert communicator to simply link that back to why they think they need you, that we have found is the path to success. And so it's people just, they're so inundated with an outside in medical chemical perspective. um, when you can meet them where they're at, all right, let's use my case, let's talk about these migraines, but let's look at another side of your body, which is how your spine's moving and functioning and the neurology involved behind that and how it's being compromised right now. And there's not a chemical solution for that that's truly a solution. And now let's talk about all the other impacts that's having on the expression of your life and how you're interacting with your world, how your brain's functioning, the different parts of your brain that are firing and not firing because of this fight or flight stress response living in your body, and what's possible as we remove that and get you into your frontal cortex and get that firing. Um, that's the gift. I think we all put together our own story and what chiropractic is. But what I learned from those greats, I think really set the stage for certainty when I came out of school, which and today we know, Ben, from the work we do at Chiro Matchmakers, that it's really probably about 15% of chiropractors who are really hardwired entrepreneurs. Most chiropractors aren't wired that way. They're truly caregivers. They're clinicians. Most people, it's a huge slap in the face when you're like, wait, I've got to go figure out how to run a business. I thought I could just get this degree and help people with my hands, and that was appealing. So, the best tool that anybody coming out of school, whether you're entrepreneurial and you're going to open a practice on your own, or you're looking for a practice to partner up with and work alongside with a great group of people, your certainty that you bring to the table is huge. And so it's all the way back to, even it's maybe a little harder today in some respects, but it's also a lot easier because of technology to find. There's so many great docs out there who have this message, and the more you're exposed to, the higher your certainty. And that's what anybody's looking, whether somebody's looking to hire you as their chiropractor because you're in business on your own, or a group or an individual's looking to bring you on to join them. It's that certainty they're looking for, so that they're looking for somebody who can provide great care to their people. That comes back to your certainty in what you're doing. And there's, the more you get into this kind of PT nutrition, sort of, it's ambiguous. Some of the students we see today, they don't really have a clear path on what they have to offer, like what their value is. And I think when you're really clear on what you do and what your value is, your certainty goes up. And now, it's easier for you to attract clients. It's easier for people to bring you on board as a team member because of that. So.
Hmm. Yeah, no, one of the ways that I'm encouraging students to approach the study of becoming a chiropractor is to develop their inner state. And their inner state is their inner scientist, their inner thinker, their inner artist, but also their inner teacher and their inner entrepreneur. And I just want to lead with the entrepreneur, because I do believe that even if you go and associate, you still have to think like an entrepreneur, if your mission is to reach people with chiropractic. So I appreciate you saying that only 15% of students coming out of school are hardwired to be entrepreneurs. I'm not trying to discourage people from becoming chiropractors by telling them that you have to become an entrepreneur, but I do think that it's important that we start to set the stage before chiropractic school that entrepreneurship is an aspect of study that you should take seriously. What do you think about that? So just to let you know, so the pre-Chiro program is trying to also encourage students to start their own pre-Chiro club. So I
Mhm.
was wondering if maybe you can also just touch on like what it was like to start your practice, and
Yep.
maybe students can learn from that of like how to
Yeah.
start their own club.
Yeah, there's a lot to speak on there, Ben. First, I'll say again, I get to work with all kinds of owners in chiropractic, and like anything, there's not one person who's an owner. However, there are traits that tend to lend themselves to people growing a practice faster. The two biggest traits really come down to extroversion and dominance. And the reason those two play in, then there's two other traits called patience and conformity. So these are things we measure at Chiro Matchmakers. And so the true entrepreneur across all industries, not just in chiropractic, tends to be pretty high in their dominance. The reason that's important for chiropractors is you don't mind a little pushback. You know, people who are really high in their dominance tend to actually enjoy debate and pushback, and they get kind of jazzed by that. Where dominance helps you in a business perspective is it's not hard for you to ask somebody to close somebody. You know, I'm presenting a care plan. Here's what it costs. How would you like to get started? If you naturally have a higher level of dominance, that's not too big of a deal. If you're lower on your dominance, which is the vast majority of all healthcare providers, not just chiropractors, that's kind of uncomfortable. So you're going to need a good set of tools to make up for that. And so that's one aspect. Then the extroversion side of things is the more people you meet and greet, the more you treat. If you're energized by getting out and joining groups and doing talks and doing screenings and putting out content, um, it does just innately make it more easy for you to attract people in than if you're introverted and that's draining your energy. It can be done, and technology has allowed that more than ever. And then you have patience. People with a low level of patience have this internal drive to get things done quickly. That serves an entrepreneur because you only have so much money and so much time to make this work before it doesn't work. And so people with low patience get really agitated. They're really quick to move if things aren't working, to make things work. You know, traditionally, like commission salespeople have this kind of, they're hard driving. Most chiropractors we find have a very high level of patience, which is phenomenal to build relationships, to to really to stay in something long term. It's a really important trait, but sometimes it's tough if you're trying to launch a business. And then the conformity or the systems measurement that we look at, Ben, is the more systems oriented a person is, the more they really are motivated by systems and process procedure, versus a big vision person. And so a lot of times, what's classic for us actually is you get these entrepreneurs who've built a great practices that go to 1,000 a week and whatever a year. They scale really quickly. There's a ton of energy. There's all the things I just talked about, but the back end of those practices are usually a train wreck. Like they're not following, the notes are horrible. They're not following up with care plans. The collections are off. The books are off. It's like all front end energy. And then we come across owners who are the other end of that spectrum, right? They have they're the ones that are attracted to very specific techniques, great notes, following care plans. They're so detailed in their accounting, but a lot of times they're missing the front end that it takes to attract people into the practice. So it's not right or wrong. It's not that you can't do either. This is back to self-awareness and knowing who you are. These are four cornerstone behavioral traits that any kind of assessment out there that you look at is essentially, they might call them different names, but they're measuring these things. And so knowing how you're wired is really gonna help you. Now, the good news that's happening very quickly, probably because of COVID, Ben, is we're seeing more and more positions now that are at 150, 200,000. Our highest position we've ever placed was $800,000. These are all associateships. So there's a big shift in our profession. What's happening is these successful practices who figured out how to bring value, um, and they're good, they're well-run businesses, they're able to afford to pay these doctors what a doctor should be paid. And so that's really changing and opening up what's possible, for chiropractors. We actually have more and more chiropractors closing their doors because we have jobs that are like, I'd be making $75,000 more a year and not have to deal with staff and headaches and overhead. Sign me up. I really never wanted to run this. So it's just, there's always been this thing, and it was this way when I came out, that if you were going to make a decent living, you had to go about it on your own. But, there's some really cool practices and really cool people like yourself in practice. And as you reach a level of success, you have either there's more people to serve than you can serve, or you want to start to buy back some of your time freedom as the owner for your family. And that's where, these well-run practices can afford to bring in docs and pay them what a doc should be paid. And that is, then now we're talking about what's the philosophy of the practice, and are they just looking for a paycheck, or are they really certain in who they are and what their perspective is on chiropractic and what they can bring to that practice. And so when I came out of school, there was a coach I used while in school named John Whitney. John's no longer with us. We actually developed a program called Next, Dr. Stephen Franson, who you've had on the program, and myself. And we walked through the 10 different tracks available in Next that a chiropractor has available to them. And most people think it's either associateship or open on my own, but we find there's degrees of all of that today. But Next, the story behind the story is that was some content I learned from John Whitney. And he kind of would walk us through as we were in our last year of school. What does it look like to open on your own? What does it look like to buy a practice? What does it look like to be an associate? What does it look like to be an independent contractor? Pros and cons of each, which we've done in the next program. We're not biased to any one of them. We'll give you all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, so that people are eyes wide open. And so in John's program, I had known at that point, because what we talked about earlier, I wanted to have a family-oriented practice. I liked the idea of a cash practice. I wanted an open practice. And there were none of those in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so I used John's program, he had a little postcard, and I got a list from the state association, and I wrote a handwritten letter with a postcard inside that was already stamped. And I sent it to everybody in Albuquerque with a license, basically saying, hey, if you're looking to sell your practice, you're looking for an associate, looking to lease space, I'm moving to the area, I'm looking to set up shop. And I think I got 13 responses back that were a range of people selling practices, hiring associates, had space to rent. And I went to all 13, and none of them matched my vision, which I think was very clear to me because of my experience and all the people I'd been exposed to in chiropractic school. So I decided I needed to open on my own. And that was a bit, well, I talked earlier about favor and things lining up for me, Ben. And there was a time back then where the credit card companies would very regularly send you blank checks in the mail. And what I didn't know at the time is that was called a consumer line of credit, I think is what it was called. And so I moved to New Mexico. None of these practices were what I wanted. Decided to open on my own. I went to 11 different banks. And it was the same story. They're like, you're a new grad, you have no collateral, you got good credit, that's about it. You've never done this. The last banker, though, he pulled me aside as I was leaving. He said, can I tell you something? He said, you have good enough credit. You probably can get a consumer line of credit with one of the credit card companies. He's like, do you get those checks in the mail? I was like, yeah. He said, I would call them. He said, basically, they give you a credit card without the card. It's checks. So I called my credit card company at the time, MBNA, and like within 3 minutes, I had a $60,000 consumer line of credit, and I still don't quite know how that worked out, because we have so many friends and know so many people that come out, and that's the hiccup, is the money to getting started. One of my best stories, though, there's a way around everything, Ben. One of my good friends is well, a couple of them, but who comes to mind is Dave. I just blanked on Dave's last name. CLA. The
Fletcher.
Insight, Dave Fletcher, thanks. Dave started his first practice out of a hotel room, in a motel room. He had like people lined up outside, and he'd sleep in the room and throw in a table. And so, there's always a way now. I hadn't heard that story back when I was coming out, but it is funny when you're on purpose how things line up in whatever form. But I will tell you, we have found for a lot of docs coming out, that's scary to them, and it's not appealing to them. And so that's what's kind of cool is if there are opportunities. I'm really bullish on chiropractic right now more than ever, because I'm seeing what's happening with salaries. The other thing that's happening because of that, Ben, is that's just interesting for students to hear, is there's more consolidation starting to happen in chiropractic. if you go back and look at these other industries, dentistry is the most obvious one. I think 15 years ago or so, 80% of dentists worked on their own. Now 80% of dentists work for a company. Um, we get a call at Chiro Matchmakers almost, I haven't had one in the last couple of months, but a couple of months through the last 3 years of large groups with large amounts of money looking to move in and consolidate chiropractic. And so, they see like this is an interesting model. What's happened, Ben, because of healthcare, if you do this right, what we see in our practices is we become the primary care physician, the trusted doctor, because people are paying out of pocket. They're not changing every year when their health insurance changes. So people don't have that. Very few people have that true family doctor anymore. When you grew up, there was the doctor, and they had the babies and took care of the parents and grandparents when they died and everything in between. Well, that's not the healthcare world anymore. So when you have a cash practice and people aren't coming to you because of you're on their insurance plan, you have built enough value that they're willing to pay their hard-earned dollar for what you offer. That takes a lot of skill to build that value, as you know, but what you end up with is you earn this trust in these people's lives where then you become their trusted expert. And so, that's our litmus test is how many of our practice members are calling, asking for our opinion when something happens before they do anything because they trust us. So I lost my train of thought there. I was talking about Dave. I was talking about being primary care. I guess just my point in all of that is, I know, being opportunistic. We now have this role to play, to be this advisor in families' health that chiropractors never had. Also, we're seeing like people are able to charge per visit is going up quite a bit because of inflation and because of COVID. That's what we used in our offices. Sorry, there's extra expenses because of COVID right now. And it's been amazing how well these price increases have been tolerated. When we're interviewing a doctor to see if we're going to take on a job at Chiro Matchmakers, we jump into the numbers. And it's interesting how many, offices now are averaging $90, $100, $125 a visit versus, there was a time where I remember that number was $30, $40 a visit. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because now that office can afford to pay, to keep really good staff around. And think about it. If you're a great chiropractor, are you going to go work for somebody for $75,000? I mean, you're going to go open on your own. But if you're a really great chiropractor and you can go work for somebody 3.5 days a week for $200,000 and not have to deal with the stress of things, that becomes really appealing. And so that's an opportunity. And then you've got all this consolidation where there's literally tens of millions of dollars now in chiropractic, and these groups are trying to put together practices, and they have huge bankrolls because the numbers actually make sense. This is where I was going with that thought. Because we become these lifetime advocates for people, we tend to build very stable lifetime family wellness practices. When people understand what a subluxation is, what the importance of a healthy nervous system is, and they want that for their kids, and they've watched their kids grow up in it, and you've got a whole practice of these people, that's a really interesting, stable, fun business. And you're seeing private equity start to recognize, that's really interesting. And here's the big thing too, Ben, that chiropractors don't own enough. What service business can you spend a couple minutes with a person and charge what we charge? I mean, look at a massage therapist. They have to spend an hour to charge a similar rate. Like, you can do a great adjustment in a few minutes. There's no other service business that matches that. So chiropractors get so distracted on all these, whatever the latest blinky, shiny laser, decompression, soft wave, supplement. I'm not knocking those things. We work with a lot of practices that have built around those, but people tend to lose track of like, why don't you just take care of a volume of people, give them a great experience, give them measurable outcomes, and people will pay for that. And so now you've got private equity coming in, and what the point of this whole story is, it's driving up wages. So offices that are competitive, that are successful, are thriving. We saw that with COVID. Practices either exploded or they shriveled on the vine and stopped. So I don't know. It's just, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing because it starts to get students thinking about this conversation before what happens a lot of times is it's their last semester and they're like, oh shit, what's my option? And the truth is where a lot of them ended up is the joint. And, we see so many people that joint becomes like an apprenticeship, and you can knock on it all you want. They are providing adjustments. I don't love that they're not doing any kind of, measurable assessments. And that's actually where we really benefit from the joint, because it's like Starbucks, Ben, back in the day. Um, Starbucks would roll into town and they'd try to Walmart people. When Walmart would come in town, all the mom and pop shops would go out of business. Starbucks tried to do the same thing, but it didn't work. What happened is Starbucks came to town, taught everybody about coffee, and then people started figuring out that actually the better coffee was at the mom and pop places. So they introduced them to the concept. And what they learned is the best thing that could happen to your mom and pop coffee shop was Starbucks coming to town. Those businesses exploded. I
Mm.
actually think the joint's having a similar effect in chiropractic. Like it or not, they're exposing a larger group of the population to what chiropractic is. And so now, if you have something unique in your practice after they've been exposed, it's a very easy value add. It's Planet Fitness. There's a lot of people that only want to pay $10, but there's a lot of people who get serious at Planet Fitness who then end up going to Orange Theory or CrossFit, they're paying $125, $150. It's sort of a similar dynamic. So,
Mm.
and the point of that is, I think we're seeing the usage rates of chiropractic bump up because of all of these factors. And so at the end of the day, it's a good time to be a chiropractor. There really is opportunity, in where I'm speaking from is the dollars. If the money wasn't there, I'd be blowing smoke up everybody's butt. But we're taking on jobs on a daily basis that are paying great six-figure incomes because these practices are so successful and they need help. And I think that bodes well for the profession. And those practices that are thriving, Ben, by and large, are practices that are delivering chiropractic care. And that's the interesting part. They're very principled. They're clear on their messaging. They're clear on their business systems. They have a very clear path when people come in. They understand what they're buying. One of my good friends and mentors is Patrick Chintempo, and one of his best lines is "Confused minds don't buy." You need to be very clear on what it is that you're offering, and the more you start offering, the more confusion starts settling in. And so, now with that said, we do have some integrative and functional practices that we work with that do phenomenally well, and those are some of the higher paying positions. But by and large, if I'm looking at a study of all the jobs we take on, most of them are very well run chiropractic practices that focus on the adjustment, and they're really good at it. So that was a long diatribe of a lot of topics, but I think I
No, that's
touched on
what this
everything
is
you
all
asked.
about. That's what this is all about. Thank you so much, because if I'm a prospective student, if I'm a current student and I hear that last 10 minutes, there's so many topics you touched on that somebody can go and study for themselves. They can go deeper on if they're interested. They can go to your website. They can learn more about Chiro matchmakers. They can start to recognize opportunities they weren't aware of that are available and exist, probably around the country. Are you guys international or
Yeah,
national? Tell me a little bit more about Chiro Matchmakers. What's the process like if a student coming out of school wanted to work with you guys, or
sure.
if you get contacted, how do you work with students?
Yeah, we I founded that with Dr. Stephen Franson back in 2015, and Dr. Franson is a coach. I am not. I own a chain of clinics. I own clinics in Dallas and in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I had a couple practices fail and close, and that's very expensive, about $300,000 right out the door when a practice fails. And but I had this dream to scale up and bring what we do to more people beyond what I was able to do by myself in practice, Ben. And so um, I was in a CEO group at the time called Vistage. So I was with, um, all these other, 10, 20, $100 million businesses, and hearing how they thought. And I started learning a lot from them. I'll tell you one of the simplest things from the plumber in the group. This guy had a $20 million a year plumbing business. And it was really simple. His plumbers were all plumbers. And he paid them better than anybody in town. And this guy would leave town for 8 weeks at a time on vacation. And he just had this beautiful business. And he gave me some criticism once. He's like, "Why are your chiropractors doing so many other things than what they went to school with to be chiropractors? You've got them out there doing marketing. You've got them training people. You've got them." He's like, "In my business, I've got other people that do that. My plumbers went to school to be plumbers. I pay them better than any plumber. I give him a great environment. His average plumber had been with him for 20 years." That was a big light bulb moment for me about, oh yeah, maybe that makes a lot of sense. So in that Vistage group, um, bigger companies have access to a lot of behavioral measurement tools, which I alluded to earlier. We use one called ProScan at Chiro Matchmakers. But most people get hired because of their technical background. Hey, we have the same philosophy. You know my upper cervical technique. We have a similar background. You're hired. That's true of all professions. You get hired for your technical ability, but you get fired for behavioral reasons. It doesn't mesh. Well, that stuff's oftentimes, much of it's predictable. And most companies have figured this out. Chiropractors, being small business owners and being these assessments, the good ones, there's a lot of like online free assessments, Harry Potter and DISC and Colby and Strength Finder. We've seen these things. But there's a higher level of these assessments that larger companies use that are incredibly accurate. They've been around since the 50s, but they're expensive. And so other people in my Vistage group were using those. And I started realizing that my two failed offices, I had behavioral issues, and then I had offices that were really thriving. And so I started getting interested in trying to get data and measure. If I'm going to scale this, I've got to make this predictable. I can't just hope that people I put together thrive. How do I measure this? So I was doing this deep dive of measuring any measurement I could find, literally any cognitive assessment, behavioral assessment, anything. And I started to learn what I was just sharing with you. There's a range of these. As I was doing that, Dr. Franson and I were old friends I've always hired coaches. I'm a big fan of just learning from people. So one of my first coaches was Dr. CJ Mertz. The WLP was his group back then. And Dr. Franson was in WLP. And we both had this goal of 1,000 a week practice. And so we met when we were both on our way to achieving that. So we were probably both in the 500, 600, 700 visit a week range. And we just liked each other. I love Dr. Franson because I was always blessed with a lot of extroversion. I could bring new patients in the front door really easily, but his superpower was he figured out how to have people stay. And I recognized that he had a set of strengths I didn't have, and I was always attracted to him for that reason. If you can not have to keep bringing people in because they get it, that's a lot better way to build a practice. So anyways, we were around each other for a few years in that environment at seminars. And then, we both moved on past that group and lost track of each other. And we ran into each other at CalGym in probably 2014, 2015, had been several years. I had started scaling practices and doing all these measurements. He had gotten into the coaching world. And the biggest challenge he was having with his clients is with staff. And he's like, what are you doing over here? And so anyways, it was through that conversation that it was like, so I should back up. I have a business called Ideal Team. So I had started doing consulting for other industries. We do a lot in tech and using all this behavioral stuff, a lot in tech and a lot in construction, a lot in restaurants. And Steven's like, what about chiropractic? Would you consider doing what you do in chiropractic? And I was like, anyways, I was hesitant at first. He talked me into it, and we realized there was a niche and a need. The problem the challenge in chiropractic was just, we can charge the average placement service, Ben, charges 30% of first year salary. So in other industries, we can charge on a $100,000 job, $30,000 to place somebody. Those economics don't work in chiropractic typically. So we had to figure out how to scale a model that chiropractors could afford to use that brought them great value. And so out of that, Chiro Matchmakers was born. Same thing there. We started just consulting, looking at teams, helping people understand, all right, here's the makeup of the team. Here, everybody's maybe wired one way. Behind this work, Ben, is a basic philosophy we've seen that the best teams are very diverse teams. That's a very clear, just different people, different ages, different backgrounds. We tend to hire people like ourselves, but the best teams have really different people because they have different blind spots and different strengths. And, not everybody has all strengths. We're not all things. So a really good team is constructed of people who make up these different strengths. So we were consulting initially for chiropractors. And then probably after the 50th person or so was like, great, can you help me find that person I'm missing? No, we don't do that. We finally realized we better figure out how to do that. So today we have our recruiting team is 20 people deep here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We do placements all over the world, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Europe, Canada. the bulk of our work is in the States. But at any one time, we have a couple hundred jobs open. The thing I don't advertise on the site, but I'll share with you guys, we won't touch a job that's under $80,000. Most of our jobs now are at six figures, and we vet them that there's really clear systems and procedures in place. That's one of the reasons these relationships go bad is the doc built a successful practice, but it's all in their head. And so if you get somebody who's really wired to be a caregiver, who has no interest in running a practice at this season of their career, but what they are motivated by is really clear training, systems, procedures. And if that office is kind of a shit show, it's very demotivating for a person. So we're very careful with the practices we bring on, that they're strong financially, they're paying a good salary, and they have a good team and really clear systems. So, but if you hop on the chiromatchmakers.com website and click on, jobs, we have a map, and there's just, hundreds of jobs on there that people can look at. We have recruiters. Our recruiters work different regions of the country, so they really are learning. You talk to the person who runs the Southeast, they know the climate, they know what salaries are getting where, who's looking for jobs. We are also huge. Steven and I started this business with the idea we're going to be massive advocates for associates. It's been backwards in our profession forever, not paying people enough to live on. This attitude of kind of, you're lower than me because you're an associate. Our thing we like to joke about, but it's true, is you don't hear a brain surgeon saying, "Oh, I'm just an associate brain surgeon at the hospital." No, you're a brain surgeon. You're a chiropractor. You're a colleague. You're not less than because you're not dealing with the business. We're still kind of weird that we have most owners or chiropractors that are operating the business. Look again at healthcare. They have business specialists that are running the business. The doctors are doing the doctor stuff. Sorry, I had a call come in. I hope that didn't disrupt too bad. Anyways, that's how that business came about, and so we're massive advocates for when we started this business, the average salary was $50,000. The Federal Bureau of if you Google it, the government right now, the average salary now is up to 85,000. I think we've played a big role in that, and our goal is to get that average salary up above 100,000 pretty quick. Because again, you come out of school with $250,000, you weren't looking to own a business. You need to know there's a good career path. The other side of that is, and this is the work Dr. Franson does, and there's a lot of other great coaches too. What's really cool, Ben, is we don't compete with anybody. So we have a lot of coaches that refer into us as well, from all kinds of different, Dr. Russ Rosen, Nona Javid. I could go on down the list. The Maximized Living Group. We have a lot of the Amped group. Like, we work with everybody because at the end of the day, they're just looking for really quality people. And what's great is if people are in those programs, whatever the program, they're usually following a system, which makes it really interesting. So yeah, if somebody's a student, like I said, we've got that next program. They can call and reach out to one of our recruiters and let them know who they are, where they're at, what they're looking for. We named it Matchmakers because we really see ourselves more as matchmakers than like a headhunter or a staffing agency. Like, we're really looking for, what's your dream job? What's the technique? What's the location? What are the hours? What's the salary you need to make? And so the more students we know that are coming out, we have jobs and we can start to match them into those jobs. Our biggest sell for students, Ben, is for owners is the knock that students aren't experienced. And it's valid. If you've got a practice that's moving and seeing 100 people a day, you need somebody who can jump in there and adjust. And that's where it's so neat there's several techniques out there, technique teachers out there with the Kairos group and the yoga chiropractic group, and my classmate Patrick with Syntropy. And I would encourage students to get into those, because if you come out and you can adjust well, you're actually able to compete with somebody who's been out for 5 or 10 years on salary. If the doc has to spend 6 months getting you up to speed, you're gonna realize that impact in what you're able to command as a salary when you come out of school. So that's probably the biggest challenge with students. So when you find a student who's really certain, really clear, and they're proficient in what they like to do, that's easy for them if they don't think they want to go the route of opening their own practice. And I'd encourage them to do that too. as you're seeing, I mean, again, this consolidation, what's really behind that is down the road, if you've got a really successful, stable practice, or you've got a group of stable practices, there's a really handsome exit for you waiting. It's not like the old, one or two times at EBITDA, it's called profit for selling your practice. These gyms like Planet Fitness, so they've got reoccurring revenue models. They're getting 10 times revenue. There's private equity firms that are like, wait, you've got a practice base of how many people who've been coming for how many years, who pay how much money? You now can get a 10x multiple, which is cool because that wasn't available for chiropractors before. So, anyways, there's a lot. I know I'm touching a lot of areas all over the board, but it's
We
where I spend my
appreciate
days and
it.
my
We
time.
appreciate it. At the end of the day, these types of topics, these types of details are invaluable. So I appreciate it because I was never exposed to this stuff. Even to this day, I haven't been exposed to a lot of what you touched on. So, and I'm pretty resourceful. I'm looking everywhere that I can in the profession.
Ben, let me mention something too, just because it doesn't get spoken, but I'm part of a group. I'm the chairman of the board. It was a group started by Patrick Gentempro several years ago, but we're a board-run organization. It's called UAC. And UAC is a group of about 100 chiropractors from around the world. And it's you'd be shocked if you saw the list of that group. And why UAC is so unique is it's agnostic. You've got people in there that are coaches. You've got multiple coaches in that room, which is odd, right? You think of chiropractic, like, why would these different coaches be hanging out? And then you've got people who own chains of clinics, franchise owners, multiple clinics, and then you've got functional people, nutrition experts. I mean, personal injury experts. There's such a gamut in that room, but what the room has in common is everybody in there has built a very successful chiropractic practice and has now gone on to the next iteration of their career. And so that's all the things I just touched on. There's coaching, there's people scaling practices, there's people get interested in other aspects of practice, functional stuff, for instance. But that group is out there, and a lot of we're very quiet. We don't promote it. But it's really, I think, what's changing the landscape of the profession, because you have this group that's not infighting. You've got different ideas, different approaches to practice. But what everybody loves in that room is chiropractic. And what they realize is, there's also in that group a lot of enterprise clients. So people who are the owners of the different software companies, tech platforms for chiropractic, different EHR company owners and creators, and text platform and marketing people. And so you get this melting pot,
Ecosystem.
yes, ecosystem of ideas where people are constantly, what are they, what am I seeing as a person who's placing? That gives the person who's building a platform for their EHR system a different perspective, or and so um, there's niches in chiropractic that not everybody's really aware of. And what I've seen with chiro matchmakers too is some of the most successful practices are these smaller niche groups that you've never heard of. And all of a sudden, like, we've placed, I'll tell you one, gosh, I think you're going to have one of our partners on here, Dr. Mark Mao, pretty soon. Um, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. It's something like breakthrough coaching, but that's Mark Santa. It's a little different, but I mean, these docs are doing 3, 4, 5 million in their offices, and we've probably placed like 30 of them for them. Like, I've never heard of these people. Like, they're not out there promoting who they are, but they're this little niche. And I guess back to the original, how we started this call, if you've got a curious mind and you start following these rabbit trails, there is there is so much there's so many unique tailored ways to practice and in a successful manner that it's just there's no excuse for people anymore in today's world.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, this is probably the 200th conversation that I've had, and I'm highlighting the people that are the coaches, the mentors that have the software companies. You've got the Chiro matchmakers. I mean,
Mhm.
I've had all the presidents on from, the quote unquote vitalistic schools. I haven't been able to get some of the other people on, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I believe that building a connected ecosystem for the profession to really function better from within, meaning like students, if they have questions about EHR, they can go look at the 20 different EHR options and they
Yeah.
can If they have questions about mentors or coaches, they can go look at the 50 different mentors. So, yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I
Cool.
think I think there's a lot of potential with the profession. I definitely think that the profession has not reached its potential, and I think that we need to ask better questions. Like when I hear you talk about that UAC company and you've got all these successful people. For example, I've had Mark Santa on, and
Uh-huh.
you know, recently the Olympics had a commercial for chiropractic, and
Saw that.
I didn't really feel as though it was very descriptive or it
Yeah.
communicated chiropractic very well.
Yeah. It
Um,
was ambiguous, huh?
yeah, so I'm like, why hasn't the successful people that have maybe pooled their resources or are on the same page
Yeah.
talked about? Because commercials, I was in conversation with a film production company recently, and they're like, yeah, it's about $30,000 for like a decent 1 minute commercial.
Yeah.
Um,
What's cool,
why?
Ben, is like UAC. Um, so in order to be in UAC, the minimum requirement is your business has to do $1 million a year. So there's businesses in that room that are doing $20 million in the chiropractic space. And so in UAC, when you're a member of UAC, there's a group called UAC Angel Investors. And so every time we host a UAC, we have a couple businesses or people come pitch what they do. And it's almost, excuse me, like a Shark Tank, if you will. And if it's a good enough idea, the last business, we just raised $400,000 inside of the room for a group, a successful chiropractor out of Florida. Him and his wife, the Browns, has several NUCA practices, have done great, and she has this practice. She has a passion for moms. She was away from her family, had 3 kids, a newborn. It's 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and they're not breastfeeding, and she's literally about to lose her mind, and there's no resource to go. So she started a website called I Help Moms, ihelpmoms.com, where you can pay by the minute live consultants that on like 12 different topics, breastfeeding, all natural, the way that most chiropractors raise their families. And it was so she raised 400 grand in a matter of 10 minutes through the UAC and Angel Investor Fund. So there are those things happening, and we've got our next events in Santa Fe here next month, and there's a couple businesses that are, and so we've had different ideas and different people coming through. And if it's a tight enough idea, there is money out there, to put into these things. I'm also happen to be on the board of, I think, a group that maybe touches this the best. And if have you had Baron on here yet? Baron Hogue?
I was I I've rescheduled it a couple times.
Yeah.
I've had a private conversation with him though, and yeah, he's gonna be on within the next couple weeks.
So CDC is um, a great group, and that was actually Stephen Franson's brainchild to name it CDC, Chiropractic Defense Council. I think that it's cool because it's totally, it has one single purpose, and that's to protect the rights of practicing chiropractors. And so got tired of always having, like, you know in Australia you can't adjust kids now, or you can't take x-rays in Vancouver, and the chiropractors locally are always on their heels backpedaling looking for help. We're like, what if we could come in there with an army, literally a fund with PR people, hired researchers, hired attorneys, to just beat this stuff down offensively so we protect the rights of chiropractors. And it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, that I watched that idea come to fruition at a UAC event a year and a half ago down in Cabo, Mexico, and to look at the board that's been built. And last I talked to Baron, it's like 3,000 or 4,000 people, chiropractors, contributing to that. It's like, $33 a month based on 33 principles. And there's literally no agenda. The books, I was around at Parker. There's a couple of these groups that came through, and I think just raised money and took it, and who knows what happened with it. But so I guess what I'm saying is there are avenues where you're seeing this stuff happen. But I would encourage everybody listening, go check out the CDC. That group is like nothing we've seen in the profession. We now have more members in the CDC than the ACA, the ICA, than any other group in chiropractic. Like in a year and a half, there's more influence in that group. But it's not trying to push an agenda. It's just trying to stand up for chiropractors. If somebody goes, hey, Ben, you're not allowed to see babies anymore, you know who you can call now, and there's going to be an army right there going, time out. Here's the research. Here's the law. Here's the legal team. Here's the PR team,
Mm-hmm.
so that we protect what we're doing. So yeah, get Baron on here, because it's been neat to see what that group does. And again, it just leads to the theme of this conversation. There are groups in this profession that are thriving, that have a big vision. Because you know how it goes. You can also get in sewing circles of people who are really frustrated, who are really struggling, who are failing, and everything looks really bleak. And that's the lens they're looking through. And you can get into that thinking really quickly. But I'm here to assure you that there's a lot of other groups that are on the other side of that spectrum that are really pushing what's happening, and advocates for the profession moving forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, this is not a pushback. I want to honor your
Please.
time and maybe wrap up in a few minutes or really soon if that's okay. But
Yeah.
basically, from my point of view, and obviously it's a limited awareness based on you telling me 10 things that I wasn't aware of. It seems like we're always on the defense as a profession.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you've talked a lot about offense in this conversation, but it seems as though defense has been like our primary leading force, like our dominant force.
Yeah.
As a profession, and I feel as though a project like the one I'm working on here is really all about going on the offense, like inspiring prospective students. Hey, you have the ability now to educate your guidance counselors that chiropractic is a viable option and give them these materials. You have an opportunity to bring chiropractors to the classrooms at your
Yep.
college campus. You know what I mean? There's no presence at the moment. I'm just curious, like, yeah, I want to come do a pitch.
Yeah, you're welcome. You don't have to be a UAC member to come do a pitch. There's a board you present it in front of. But it's sort of back to what we alluded to earlier: power versus force, right? I mean, when you're coming at things from a place of power versus force, you're absolutely right. We've been on the defensive. At the end of the day, like it or not, though, Ben, it is where the dollars come to. With these things cost money to really on any scale. So the best thing that can be happening for chiropractors is their success. And we know what we do works. We know there's a lot of proponents against what we do, but I mean, you go into any solid family wellness practice, it's very evident there's value in what's being done. And so,
Mhm.
the more we're elevating chiropractors successfully in what we're paying associates and what the owners are able to bring home, that it's not like any chiropractor is just sitting on their private jet, ha ha ha, laughing at the world. Like, we have these huge hearts. So now that there's some resources, we can be offensive. We can put money into things that are going to actually start to change the profession. And anyway, so yeah,
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up there. But I'm bullish with you, and that is, if somebody has an idea um, for Chiro Matchmaker, or excuse me, for UAC, and they want to pitch, they have a business that would elevate what the profession's doing in some way, we're always open to look at those, and they can reach out to me. My best email is Dr. Allen at chiromatchmakers.com, DRALLEN, and just shoot me an email and we'll get on a call. One of the members in our group is the CFO of a billion-dollar tech company, who knows this world, and so Ken's been great to shepherd people through how to. It's just there's a world of resources out there, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that a lot of chiropractors maybe in their own little circle don't realize are out there, and they're out there for us. They really are.
Mm-mm. All right. Yeah, Alan, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing with the students, and cheers.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate